We are the church. That's it. That's all I got, actually. I had that song playing in my head, and it wasn't until I clicked the record button that I was like, wait a second. I'm not singing on a recorded line. So that's where that cold open came from. Welcome, everybody, to Cross-Checking. I'm one of your hosts, Josh Laboris. I'm a pastor down in Texas, southeast of Houston. And over there, if you're watching, in a delightfully flowery shirt, is Ben Oslager, a pastor in Lake Orion, Michigan. Welcome to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for the intro, Josh.
Might be the most professional intro we've ever done.
It might have been.
Don't be disappointed, guys.
But now we're ruining it by pointing out that it was the most professional intro we've ever done, which is perfect for us because,
yeah,
I mean, the goal of this is for you guys to learn something, but also, I don't know. We're not shooting for like high key professionalism here. We're shooting for interesting and informative. So, like Chick-fil-A, we will take your order from time to time. We may not say "my pleasure" at the end of that, but
I will because I'm a good Southern boy.
Yeah,
the
you
Yankees
are.
Have no manners.
We just say you're welcome. Anyway, we have a question that was submitted by a listener, and she's curious about the structure of congregations, and we're thinking about discipleship this season. So we want to frame this specifically around what role does a pastor play in the discipleship of people? And we can broaden this out a little bit and talk about how, or what role a pastor plays in the grand scheme of the church. But here's a little bit more to the question. She's wondering if there's something, or like what our feelings are basically on a pastor-led congregation versus a congregation-led congregation, or even an elder-led congregation, which is kind of an interesting wrinkle to throw in there, and what each of those does for the church and what's the best option. So as we're thinking about that, what?
Just solve church governance quick.
Yeah, we're just going to solve church governance, but we're going to do it through the lens of discipleship because realistically,
that should be our lens as a church.
Yeah, exactly. That should be our lens as a church. And the most important thing that a church does at any given moment is make disciples. And so if your church governance doesn't point to the fact that the focus of your church is bringing people together around word and sacrament and helping them understand how those things shape their lives so that they can better follow Jesus and so that we can all go to heaven, because that's important too. You might need to rethink the way that your church runs.
Yeah.
We'll start there. So I'm going to pitch this to you, Josh. First question. What's the right answer?
42.
Okay. Good. Glad we're on the same page there. I think, so real first question. Of those three options, right? Pastor-led, congregation-led, or elder-led, where does your head go? And let's chew on this a little bit because we got to define some terms here. We got to think about what we're talking about in each of those cases. And
I suspect this is one of those things where if you ask one person what they think these terms mean, it might be different from what another person means. Which is
why it's important to define your terms.
Always define your terms. I almost think there are maybe two categories to this.
Mm-hmm.
And because you gave me a little bit of background on the person asking the question, I think it plays into this. Because for congregationally led and or elder led, which, to be fair, I think that's splitting hairs a little bit,
Yeah,
because
I agree.
elders, at least theoretically, are leaders who are lifted up from within the congregation. But there's certainly maybe a worthwhile distinction there. Those two, in the context of a pastoral vacancy, are one thing. But then there's also, I think you can be at a church that is congregationally led or elder led or pastor led with a pastor in place. And kind of how, so that gives us kind of 5 options. In the case of a vacancy, a congregational led, what I picture when I think this is a congregationally led church, you have voters meetings for everything. And kind of everything is a very open conversation with anybody who wants to be involved can be involved. Everything relies on volunteers, or almost everything relies on volunteers, and that's kind of how things get done and how decisions get made. I'm pretty confident in saying this, that can only functionally happen at a smaller church.
Yeah.
Because, and I'll kind of use an extreme example of a church in our circuit, Gloria Dei, who has, as far as I recall, well over 1,000 members. You can't just put 1,000 members in a room and say and make all the decisions. You can make some decisions, but all of the decisions that have to be made for the organization and running of a church, if you had 1,000 people contributing to that conversation at every single juncture, you would never actually get around to running the church because you'd be too busy making all these decisions. Okay, so you kind of have
reference that on a couple of quick things here. Statistically, it's at about 50 people, like 50 active members in your congregation, that you can no longer run a church that way, because you just have too many voices in the room.
That sounds right. I mean, I know you're saying statistically, but I'm thinking practically.
Yeah,
that sounds
right. Like right. Once you've got about 50 people who want to weigh in on something, you can't have everybody's voice in the room for every conversation. Like, you're going to spend so much time talking that nothing's going to get done. It's going to look a lot like civil government, where they just spend a ton of time talking and don't get anything done.
Yep.
If anyone wants to dispute me on that, I'm welcoming invitations to coffee or lunch or something, so we can argue about it. But
which this kind of gives natural rise to how I at least view maybe a more elder run congregation. And the title doesn't have to be elder, but what I'm kind of thinking is you have a select group of representatives from within the congregation who get together and make these decisions. And you still probably lean on the whole congregation for big decisions. But whether it's a board or a council or a board of elders, or like whatever the label is on it,
combination of a couple of those.
Yeah, you have kind of these representatives or these representative groups who make different decisions for the church and then implement different things for the church. Okay, so those are the two you can do without a pastor.
And for reference, it used to be that every LCMS church, Missouri Synod Church, which is the denomination we're part of, was completely like voters meeting based. I've heard horror stories from my grandpa, who used to be a president of a congregation. And was he president or he was maybe just on a committee, but of the absolute knockdown, drag out voters meetings that would happen. His church was a little bit bigger. So there were enough people in the room that like you just couldn't get everybody on the same page at the same time. But people would go into those meetings not even trying to come together, and it was a mess. Which is why like the more kind of small group led congregation model kind of started to develop.
Yeah. So with a pastor in place, so when you're not in a vacancy, you can still have both of those. And the only difference is that the pastor is likely a more heavily weighted voice in those conversations. So if you're at a voters meeting and you're having a discussion and the pastor, speaks up on something, people are not always, depends on how good the pastor is and how wise he has proved himself to be, but usually his word is going to carry a little bit more weight, which is, at least in some ways, pretty fair, because if you're looking for who has the most full view of a congregation, usually that list is pretty short, and the pastor is at the top of it, because people will come talk to the pastor about something that they won't share with anyone else. So that's and with the board, the pastor is at the board meetings, usually, at least in all the congregations I've seen, not actually a part of the board.
Yeah, usually they're advisory, not voting, but
yeah, this is part of our poly. Pastors in the LCMS are not members of their congregations, which means they cannot vote.
That's not always true.
Oh.
Well, I think a lot of pastors technically are members of their congregations, but they're not allowed to be voting members of boards. So,
which makes sense.
I think
to split hairs, I think how the LCMS prefers it, pastors are members of the LCMS.
Yep.
Serving. And anyway, but then you have pastorally led churches. And this one has, all of them have different shades to them, but this one I kind of see, you have one model that, at least in my estimation, probably has more potential for trouble, while on a day-to-day basis it is wildly effective, and that is kind of the pastor as CEO model, where he runs everything. Decisions are more or less up to him, and that means decisions can be made very quickly. That means things can be implemented very quickly. The downside is, if pastor screws up, or if pastor isn't in a relationship with the congregation so he actually knows where people are at, can cause huge rifts, huge conflicts. Congregations can collapse. Okay. The other way, and this is the leadership style I find myself hopefully falling into, is you'll have a policy-based governance where in the day-to-day, the pastor still has a lot of decision-making authority, but it is balanced and it is in tandem with some element of that representative structure that we talked about earlier. So here at Hope, we have a policy-based governance, I think is a really fair way to describe it. And if you have an organizational hierarchy, there is God, the mission, the voters, because the voters decide on who's on the board, and the voters approve the budget. And then under the voters' assembly is the board of directors and the senior pastor, unless the org chart has been changed. So you still have some of that element of, like, the pastor is driving a lot of vision, the pastor is making a lot of decisions, but not unilaterally. There is a board that's providing input. There's a board that is setting policy, and then the pastor and the other staff operate within those policies. So what is the right answer? Now that I've defined what I think these words mean, I think the right answer is whatever works best for your congregation.
That being said, as a rule of thumb, unless you're calling Jesus to be your pastor, like literally calling Jesus to be your pastor, I would strongly advise against letting one person hold the reins.
Yeah, pastor as CEO. I can't imagine a lot of places where that is inappropriate. So that's fair.
And even if you have like one great like there's a church a mile from my parents that I think of as an example of this. It's ELCA. Used to be pretty faithful, now is nowhere close. There was a pastor there who was pretty good, retired probably 20 years ago now. And people trusted him so much that they gave him a lot of decision-making authority within the church. And then they called somebody to replace him. And that pastor was a nutcase. And the church has diminished by 80% in the last 20 years. So like that's the danger to that. And I think, Josh, what you ended up kind of saying in the end there is it's whatever works, but realistically,
there are things that tend to work more is what I kind of wanted to, because like if you're a smaller congregation, it makes a lot of sense to you get so much buy-in from having a conversation with everyone. Here at Hope, that would not work. There are just too many voices. So like Hope, I am incredibly happy with this policy-based kind of board and pastor in tandem leadership. I think it works very well for us. I think we're doing church faithfully. I do. I'm fairly comfortable in saying that.
I don't disagree.
There's also at different churches that policy-based governance, especially getting it started, is a colossal pain. It is a lot of work because you need policies for stuff you used to just talk about and then go do.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So
sorry.
The nit that I was going to pick is you ended up basically saying like the goal here is that this serves the people, and I would agree with that and add that like you also, as a pastor at least, my ideal is that whatever the governance structure of the church is, it's one that not only serves the people but is driven by the people, right? So if you're having an elder board or a council or some other decision-making body within the congregation, you want those people, like you said, to be in contact with the rest of the congregation and bringing out the voices of the congregation to help define the direction of the church. You want buy-in. You want people actually doing church. You don't want people just along for the ride.
Oh, right? And I think this starts to tread in why it fits so well with our season theme is I think there is a danger to viewing the church so much as an organization that we forget we're a
body,
community of disciples.
Yeah.
You can even go so far as family of like whatever word you want to use for that.
I mean, just cite Paul here. Call it a body. Like we are a body made up of many members and we need them all to function.
And so what these different organizations do is help the body or the community or the family disciple well and support each other and grow in faith and in understanding of the things that God has given us to understand. Like, so sometimes we get very caught up in, well, do the members feel like they're being served, or are we growing, or are we bringing in enough money? And like those are questions worth asking, because those all can be valuable indicators of greater things. But the core of it is what you're doing making disciples of all nations? Like there's a big right now. I'm pretty sure this is across the board, but at least I know for sure the districts I'm in, there's a really big push on mission, vision, values, and strategic planning. And there's can be some value to that. But every time I get into I start thinking about it, I start to kind of, I get in my own head a little bit, but every time I think, we've been given our mission. We know what it is. Go make disciples. Now, is there room to kind of specify that and say, well, how do we make disciples here? What does disciple making look like in this context? Sure. Don't come at me about any of that, okay? I don't think anyone would, but we have our mission. So the question of what governance works or what leadership style works at your church, I don't mean like what feels good or what is effective at these organizational things. I mean, what is driving the congregation in their discipleship? And something I have heard here, and I think this is far enough back that I can talk about it. Way back when, however long ago, Hope transitioned from a board model to a policy model. And in that, what I've been told, again, wasn't here, don't know firsthand. What I've been told is that there was a kind of a drop off in volunteerism because people lost some of that ownership because you didn't need as many people volunteering on these boards because you had a board. And that's something that Hope has kind of had to work through and kind of grow in. And part of it was like, that's the process of transition. You have to learn how the new system works and then work within it. And I understand that and I can respect that. But if we were standing here today and there was still absolutely no volunteerism and no one wanted to do anything, then the conclusion would be, no matter how effective the organization might be, this governance style isn't working because we are not being disciples. If no one wants to serve, if no one wants to volunteer, you are failing in your discipleship. So that's, to go back to to clarify what I was saying, that is my criteria for success.
I like that. I like that as a criteria. And I think
one of the things it's pretty biblical.
It's biblical. Yeah.
If you said you didn't like that churches should be making disciples, we'd have some problems, Ben.
Anyway.
Benjamin.
A couple things that I was thinking about as you were bringing stuff up there. You said something about how, like, depending on the model that you choose, your goal is to kind of, and this is how I was hearing you. One of your goals, I guess, is to put people in the places where they can serve well, right? Or put in positions where they can serve well. So whether that's putting people on a board or a council to make good decisions because you know that they're going to make good decisions, or putting your pastor in a position where they can serve the people well, or those kinds of things. I think as we're thinking about how we structure a church, like, the goal is also enabling people to live within their Christian freedom, right? So if we're creating policies that limit people's ability to serve God within the gifting that God has given them, that might be something we need to rethink, right? Because then we're wasting gifts that God has given his kingdom. If the churches, and like, I'm going to cite some ridiculous examples here. I've heard of churches that make their pastors record absolutely everything that they're doing. To the point
I've also heard of those churches.
To the point of, like, just it shows very, very little faith and trust in pastors to actually faithfully.
If you don't trust him to,
you shouldn't have called him.
Right?
Yeah.
If you don't trust him to do the job, how on earth are you going to trust him to do the hardest part, to do the counseling, to do the confession? Absolutely. Like, what?
To care for your soul.
To lead you as a disciple? Yeah. Yeah, you can give me spiritual wisdom, but, like, I don't trust that you're going to answer your... What?
Anyway, like, so if you are that worried about your pastor making good use of their time, back off for a second, because then they're going to spend 10% of their time in a given week just recording how they're using their time. And that's time that they could have spent not an efficient use of form time. Disciples, right? That's just not a good use of their time. Like, if you recognize that nothing is getting done and your pastor is a bum, there are other ways you can deal with that.
Cattle prod.
That's not where I was going, but yeah, that would be an effective way to deal with that.
My people here know, and I don't know how much of it is leaked through on the podcast. I don't even know if Ben's super aware of this. And he might call me out here in a second. Who knows? I, by and large, am a very patient, forgiving person. Like I don't get genuinely angry very often. The kind of asterisk on that is with pastors. I have very little patience for pastors who, in my view, are not living up to the call, who are not doing this office justice. I will get steamed very quickly for pastors who suck at their job.
Yeah.
Because we're doing something important. You should do it well.
Yeah. I do have grace for the pastors who end up buried because of the weight of expectation that has been placed on them.
Yes. Well, and this isn't even to speak. Different pastors have different gifts as well.
Yeah.
Like there are pastors who they are all stars when it comes to spiritual care and counseling and visitation, but man, their public speaking is terrible. And that's like, I can understand that as long as you have the awareness and you take steps either to improve or you take steps to minimize, for example, how much you're preaching in that specific example.
Or even just like you find ways to make it work. Like you might be terrible at public speaking, but you might be an excellent writer. And if your congregation needs to just hear you read a sermon every week because that is the most effective way that you can communicate, do it. Like, yeah, that's fine. Anyway, we're off topic. Circling back, like encouraging, structuring churches in ways that allow people to live within their Christian freedom, to me, is a big part of this, right? So again, getting back to, you want to make sure that your pastor has the ability to do the things that they actually need to do as a pastor, right? If your pastor is spending the majority of the week, updating websites, making slides, yada, 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 and not with people, they're probably not most effectively serving you, right? I make it my goal to meet with at least 2 or 3 people from the congregation every week. Like, it's often a lot of the same people. It's like the congregation president, or I'm having a text chain with our elder, or meeting with different members here that are in the building more often than others. Like, that's okay. But I at least want to be in conversation with the people here at church so that I have a sense for what's going on. And I want the lion's share of my time devoted to people and making disciples of those people. I recognize I'm going to have to do some administrative work. I have to put together services. I have to, put together Bible studies and schedule things out and just have some organization. But I don't want that to take up more than
organization. It's his favorite.
Yeah, least favorite thing in the world. As evidenced by my robe laying on a chair back there.
The hanger is right there, Ben. It's right there.
You say, okay, so here's the thing. That hanger. Oh, wait, there's actually 2 robes on that chair.
I know. You might say, Josh, isn't this pot kettle? You have a jersey and it looks like some shirts over there. Okay, that's where the jersey lives, first of all. And second, those shirts are not mine. We borrowed them from someone and they just haven't gotten them yet. So, yes, I'm going to call Ben out on not hanging up his robe when the hanger is 3 feet away from the robe.
It isn't my strong suit. Organization is not my strong suit. But I will do what I need to make sure that the church runs effectively. But I'm still going to
that disciples can continue being made.
Exactly. I'm going to devote at least 80% of my time in a given week to the kinds of things that help make disciples. And that, that's that. And you can extrapolate that out to any position in the church, right? So Josh, you mentioned you've got policy-based governance now, right? And for a lot of churches, the reason that they switched to that, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about how you guys are doing this at Hope, you switch to a policy-based governance so that it gives your board more time to think about the work of the church, like discipleship.
Yeah, well, and this was developed
Hypothetically.
long before I got here, right? Hope has
Yeah.
been policy based for a very long time, as far as I'm aware. How I see it play out at Hope is it's not just the board that is freed up in that way.
Mhm.
What policy based governance at least has kind of done for us is it frees up honestly most of our volunteers, because you don't have to wait to get approval from, like, are you within the policies? Are you within the rules that we've laid out as as a church together? Then go for it. Do it. Are you going to spend money? Check. Is it in the budget? If it's in or spending plan, we do a spending plan, not a budget. Which is different. We don't spend money unless we have it in the bank. For anyone who's wondering, that's the distinction between a spending plan and a budget. So even if over the year we have kind of outlined this is what we think we're going to be able to spend on this, if we don't have it yet, we don't spend it. So that's anyway. Is it in the spending plan? Go get it. Go for it. Fill out your receipt form afterward.
Yeah.
So and from what I see here, is it does that exceptionally well. We have a couple the volunteer teams that come to mind. We have a fellowship task force, an outreach task force. We have the Altar Guild, and Men's Ministry and LWML and Stephen Ministry, and these are kind of the highlight ministries here, and they don't have to wait to go do things; they can just do them, and that's really cool, and that is something that not always, but sometimes can be a bit of a hang up if you're congregationally driven or board driven, just because a lot of time, especially if you're making any sort of significant decision, you have to wait to talk to the congregation or to talk to the whole board. And that can be really good, because then you're getting insight and the idea might improve as a result of that. So there are benefits there. But with the policy-based governance is it just kind of, it takes some of that red tape out of the way for volunteers at all levels. I mean, and just, thinking through, like, a meeting I had last week, I had a couple of guys in here. We've been talking about organizing a church cruise for fellowship. Before they left there, we were putting together a survey to go out and see, like, what the interest level is and what it might look like. Like, you can't necessarily make decisions that quickly if you have a different governance structure. So that's kind of, this is the trade-off you have. I'm thankful for the policy-based governance structure, because I'm not a huge fan of meetings.
I mean, that's fair. And I think, like, as you're talking about that, again, circling back to the discipleship piece, like, this, again, better enables people to actually feel like they're free to be a disciple rather than they have to be a disciple. Like, so the distinction there for me is, like, when you have too much set in stone in the way that you're running things, whether it's you've got an overly complicated governance structure because of a constitution, or the number of voting bodies that get a say in something, or whatever the case might be, or you have a
even
super
just really unclear guidelines for how any of it works.
Also that, or if you have super authoritarian figures in the church, whether it be a council president or a head elder or a pastor, or just that one lady in the church who always is a stick, like, doesn't matter. I've heard of church circumstances where
every
all
church
of those
has
things
one.
are true. What?
Every church has one, at least one.
Yeah. Every church has at least one of those four. Whatever yours is.
Oh no, I was saying every church has at least one of those people who always has an opinion and they're always aggressive about it.
Yeah. Yes. Sure.
Ben's like, I am that person. Quiet.
But the goal is you set yourself up so that whether it's the policies or the people or the groups or whoever, is not getting in the way of your ability to be a disciple. Right?
Yes. Well, and
They're meant to check you, like Scripture, and they should be faithful to Scripture. People, boards, policies,
pastors,
whatever.
everybody.
Yeah, but they should be freeing you up to be disciples.
Well, and what we have done in these 35 minutes or however many minutes it ends up being, we've kind of set the why, which for our listener who had the question, something I would commend to you, and honestly, I would commend this to all of our listeners. There's a book by a gentleman named Simon Sinek. It's Simon, Simon, Sinek, Sinek. He's not a Christian, unless he's converted recently, at least. But the book is called "It Starts with Why," and he is a big name. He's a big contemporary name in leadership theory. So, like, I had to read a couple of his books for my doctorate of Christian leadership. Like, he was a textbook author. It doesn't read like a textbook. It's pretty easy to read, but it starts with why, because in whether you are congregationally led or board led or pastorally led or some combination thereof, if you have your why, if you know what what you are pursuing, why you are pursuing it, you are making disciples because God told you to. That is your why. It makes a lot of decisions a lot easier because you go back to, well, if we take option A, how does that impact discipleship? And if we take option B, how does that impact discipleship? The one that helps it more, that's the way you go. And one of the things that, whether it's the boards or the congregation or like whoever's speaking into this, like Ben was talking about, is you're making sure it's faithful. And that includes not just the decision itself, but its impact. And that's one of the things that this being so motivationally driven can really help knock down, because you're not just thinking about single decisions, you're thinking about where are we moving as a whole. So that would be one of the things I would commend to you as you're asking this question about different ways to lead in the church. Is It Starts with Why is a really good resource for that. And you have to, as a congregation, you have to be really clear on your why. And that can be hard because especially there can be a lot of different whys in a congregation, right? What our why is might not be what everybody else's why is. And the person who sits on the left side of the church might not have the same why as the person who sits in the middle of the church. Because one of them wants the air conditioner up and one of them wants the air conditioner down. That's a silly example.
I'm just going to put this out there because it's almost summer, both here in Michigan, and it's kind of basically already summer in Texas.
Actually, it was in the 60s today, Ben.
Okay. It'll be in the 90s before Josh knows it.
It'll be in the 90s before the end of the week, my guy.
Like I said, before Josh knows it, it'll be in the 90s. As pastors, especially when we robe up, it's hot up there. So for the love of your pastor, we get to choose the air conditioning. You can wear an extra coat in the summer.
Amen. Okay. Amen.
I have one other note I want to make, and then I think we can probably wrap it up.
I have one more thing. So you go ahead, but then
you got
before
one thing
you get to empty netters, I have a question for you.
Okay. So I think one other thing that is really important as a part of deciding how you're going to structure your congregation is you have to have a good sense of who you are too, right? You talked about the why, but I think it's also good to know the who. Like, every congregation has its own identity, and Josh and I are at fairly similar congregations. Hope is a little bit larger than Good Shepherd, but we both have preschool ministries, both single pastor congregations at this point. And both are, from at least from what Josh tells me and what I think I tell Josh, at this point, pretty healthy, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
But there's still a lot of differences, right? My congregation is a congregation that's doing a lot of healing, even though we're healthy, because they've been through so much conflict in the last 20 years, especially among the people who have been here long enough and are in leadership.
My congregation has a pastor who cut his man bun off. They're different. We're different.
There are differences. And Josh's congregation, you also describe them, at least to my hearing, I don't think you actually used these exact words, but as a congregation that had a good sense of who they were as you stepped in, right? When I got here, Good Shepherd was reeling so much that they were just looking for stability and a direction. They didn't really know who they were. And that was okay because of where we were at as a church. But you have to know who you are, right? Whether you're a congregation that's hurting, a congregation that's healing, a congregation that's confident in the mission that you know you have in front of you, a congregation that's trying to figure out who they are. You can say, we don't know who we are, but we're working on it. And that can be your congregational identity for a season. That's okay. But that's something you need to work towards, because if you don't know who you are as a congregation, like, you can pick a governance structure that is wholly incorrect for you. And I think that the easiest example of this is if you're a congregation that doesn't know who they are and you bring in a pastor that demands a lot of authority, when that pastor leaves, you're just going to be looking for another pastor that demands a lot of authority, and you're still going to have no clue who you are.
A lot of times churches like that will just take on the personality of their pastor.
Yeah.
Not unlike a unhealthy dependence in a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, very similar. And that doesn't actually encourage you to do any discipleship. That encourages you, I mean, you're kind of being discipled into being your pastor, but like, people of Hope, people of Good Shepherd, do you really want to be like Josh or me? Ask yourselves that question seriously. Because if the answer is no, and you feel like that's the direction the congregation's heading, let's talk. All right, what's your one thing, Josh? Can you even remember?
I can remember. I just want you to read the question again to make sure that we kind of clearly and concisely answer the question.
So, congregational structure, or church structure, pastor-led versus congregation-led versus elder-led. What's the best?
Yeah, I think whatever works best to promote discipleship where you're at. I'm willing to go just a step further, and I think in a situation with a pastor, a little bit of both. Because the pastor, you call a pastor to lead.
Yep.
But the pastor should not lead unilaterally. Should not lead without a lot of input and wisdom from the congregation he serves at. So,
yeah, and it should feel like your pastor is there to lead by serving, not to lead by leading.
Simon Sinek also wrote a book on that called Leaders Eat Last. I think it's less helpful than It Starts With Why, but it's still a good book.
Ready for Empty Netters?
I think I am. What about you?
I am. What's your empty netter, Josh?
Oh, my empty netter is know why you're doing what you're doing and let your leadership structure, your approach, honestly, to everything be defined by your why, which should be making disciples in some form or fashion for churches, I guess.
Yeah. And mine is, I think, along the lines of that. which is in addition to your why, know the who. Who are you? Whose are you? Not just who are you, but whose are you, right? You are redeemed children of God. Act like it, be it, enjoy it, live in it.
Pretty good. It's a pretty good place to be.
Yeah. It's a pretty spectacular place to be, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
No place I'd rather be.
yeah.
All right. Well, with that said, we hope it was helpful with your question. If you have a question, you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. Yes, you can do that. Reach out to us, email, comments, text, however you need to let us know. We're happy to deal with questions. With all that being said, brothers and sisters, go in peace. Serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thank you for listening in to this episode of Cross-Checking, a ministry of Hope and Good Shepherd Lutheran Churches, where we strive to deepen your understanding of the faith and help apply it to daily life. If this podcast is helpful to you, rate the podcast, subscribe to us on your favorite platform, and share it with others who might also gain something from it.